Welcome back to our Monday morning recaps, going game by game, every NFL game from the Sunday slates, as well as Thursday Night Football, the London game, and we're going to look at everything relevant that happened in fantasy football in every single game, what we could take away, what we're looking forward to, bye weeks, all that good sheesh, okay? So welcome in. Every Monday we do this, so make sure you're subscribed. And since it is Monday, you know that Underdog is hooking y'all up with a very, very, very luscious free square for Monday Night Football. The Chiefs take on the Saints. And if Patrick Mahomes gets one single yard in this game, one single yard, you win on Underdog Fantasy, okay? It is literally a free square. They want you on the platform, as do I, all right? So if you get onto the platform, if you download Underdog Fantasy, and you use code BDGE when you deposit $10 on there, you will get this. You will get a deposit bonus. You will get our weekly rankings at BDGE for the rest of the season, but you will more importantly get this free pick of Mahomes over 0.5 yards in tonight's game. But let's talk about the other games. Let's start with maybe, just maybe, the game of the week. My Falcons beat the shit out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Overtime thriller. We go into OT in Atlanta, 36-30. Kirk walks away. It's Monday morning. I apologize. Kirk walks away with over 500 passing yards. And with these recaps, I'm always going to try to just keep it to the fantasy relevant things. We knew Drake London was good. He played really well. Darnell Mooney is shaping up to be such a good wide receiver too in real life for the Atlanta Falcons, and just a really, really rock solid like fantasy wide receiver 3 right now, as you're seeing the Falcons are getting more and more in tune with what their offense is. This was, something I talked about a lot during the summer, something I talked about a lot during the opening weeks of the season, was that we needed time for this team to gel, man. We needed time for the Falcons with a brand new head coach, a new scheme, new OC, new quarterback. Like, there was so much moving stuff going on in Atlanta that it was always going to take a little while. And now we're starting to see that come to fruition a little bit. Now, of course, it's a little bit scary seeing Bijan down here, 12 for 61, only 3 for 16 through the air. Usually he gets it done through the air, like 4 for 45, whatever. Better days are ahead. But yeah, overall, it's just been fucking disappointing for him, is what I'll say. Kyle Pitts, 7 for 88. He had a big day. I'm going to be honest, if this opens up a trade opportunity for you, I would do that immediately. I would flip Kyle Pitts for Tucker Kraft straight up without a doubt of hesitation in my mind right now. Pitts has become this, like, if you only look at the box score, you looked at your fantasy team and said, oh, he got me 16 PPR. He had that 32-yard catch to open the game. Other than that, he was like the third and fourth read, just a check down option when Kirk had nowhere else to go. He is such an afterthought in this offense. Like 8 targets sounds great, but when you look at the number of pass attempts, 58 pass attempts, not that good anymore. That drops down to, like, I don't actually know the number off the top of my head, but I can't imagine it's much higher than like 14% of the target shares. So you have Darnell Mooney with 16, Drake London with 13, Ray McLeod gets more than him with 9, and then there's Kyle Pitts. It feels like Kirk goes through all of his reads, and then he's like, fuck. None of those guys are open. Let me see if Kyle Pitts might be open in the check down. He's not like winning his routes. There's no separation. This is easily a sell high moment for Kyle Pitts if you can. On the flip side, Baker Mayfield throws for 3 scores. 2 of them go to Evans, so that's just the way that receiver room breaks out sometimes. We will take a look at the running back room here. We have Rachaad White, who goes 10 for 72 on the ground, busted off a 56-yard run. People were saying we didn't even know if he was capable of doing that anymore. Bucky, 9 for 44 on the ground. Neither of them really do anything in the passing game. But if we look at the breakdown of snaps in the backfield, it's a lot more of the same. Rachaad White continues to hover around 65%. It started to look like it was going to trend more towards Bucky, but it did not. He still stayed stagnant around the 40% mark. Now, the one like big takeaway here is Rachaad continues to run, a lot of the routes, 53% of the routes here. But you'll start to see the inside the 5 attempts here, the goal line attempts. Rachaad White got all of them weeks 1 through 3, hasn't gotten one since week 4 started off. And Bucky Irving is getting the large majority of those. You're still seeing Rachaad White play a very heavy early down role. You're seeing him play the long down and distance roles. You're seeing him play a lot of the 2 and 4 minute snaps, which still makes him just as valuable as Bucky, but Bucky's starting to get a lot of the goal line work, which is kind of interesting there, given the build of these two guys. But right now, neither of them can really be trusted as more than like an RB3 because there's just not a ton of value going on in that backfield if we don't know what the fuck is going on. And just a quick little plug here. This website is fucking incredible. It is fantasylife.com. The utilization report updates every Monday morning at 9 a.m. where you can just go in there and look at any of these snap counts between any positions, any teams, any like groups that you want to check out. They have all these just incredible numbers, long down and distance, inside the 5 attempts. Regardless, you want to look at Saints didn't play this week, bad. No, what the fuck? Neither did the Chiefs. The Cowboys, we want to see the breakdown between Rico and Zeke, 51% in favor of Rico. He is now coming off of his season high in snaps. And we saw the big game from him last night. But point is, Fantasy Life has all of these for you. They have a package there where if you use code BDGE when you sign up, you get 20% off. It's a full year package for like $100, so you get it for $80 with our code. The link is the first thing down below. So this is one of the best resources in fantasy football right now. Let's move over to the worst game of the fucking week. And I literally wanted to just jump straight out a window because if you've been following your Idiot League Mates, our fantasy league that we're doing in the office, you knew that I had 4 London guys going, which is the woe. Like playing guys that play in London is horrible. These dudes just historically underperform in these games. A lot of it, like the travel schedule is weird, like the time of the game is weird. It's there's a lot going on here, and you could very much see in the performance of these players what's going on. So having to start 4 of them was the worst, and I started probably like the fucking 4 worst players in this game: Rodgers, Brees, Darnold, Jordan Addison. Okay, so let's start with the Jets. Rodgers throws the ball 54 times. He was not good, but the numbers like kind of got there. 2 touchdowns, did have 3 interceptions. He was getting absolutely mauled in the backfield. He ended up like getting kind of hurt at the end of the game. Apparently it's a low ankle sprain. There's some concern from some Twitter doctors about an MCL sprain, but apparently he should be good to go, whatever that means. This offense is horrendous, and this was one of the reasons why I wanted to move off of Breece Hall. Now, I tweeted this out. I had a trade offer on the table last week that I didn't go through with because I was afraid of Anthony Richardson's injury. And I was kind of right on that because Richardson didn't end up playing this week. But I put out this trade offer, right? I was getting Jacobs and Anthony Richardson. I was giving up Goff and Breece Hall. And if you look at all of these replies, all of these cones who would rather win a trade than win a fantasy matchup, every single one of them was like, nah, the Breece side. The Breece side was a fleece, absolute fleece by Goff and Breece side. Those responses, I knew I was fucking right. I should have just pulled the goddamn trigger on this trade, but I was scared of Anthony Richardson. Yeah, this is what happens when you don't watch football at all and you just look at box scores and you hang on to value. If you watched any of this game, if you watched any of Breece Hall play, he quite literally looks like Najee Harris out there. Now, the line is doing him no favors. The line is horrendous out there in London and New York. He is getting hit 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage every time. My major fucking concern right now is we actually saw a couple holes, right? He saw like 1 or 2 holes, which is more than he's gotten at any given week so far. He saw 1 or 2 holes. His explosion was 0. Like there was nothing that happened when he got holes there. There is something going on there. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's an undisclosed injury. I don't know if he put weight on this preseason. But if you watch literally any football, and again, this is coming, like we're here in New York. We get every Jets game, and we watch them every Sunday. This has been the same thing. Like what you guys saw on the London game with Breece has been what we've been getting every single week. He scored a couple touchdowns in the beginning of the year, but he has looked awful as a runner. But yeah, we'll move on from there. Just a bunch of cones, by the way. Just try to one time think for yourself. Be an original thinker. Watch some football, make an opinion, and then get out there and fucking say that opinion. Receivers, Garrett Wilson, 22 targets. Somehow ends up with 101 yards on 22 targets. Good to see, I guess. Like if you're a Garrett Wilson owner, this is fucking incredible. I don't know that it actually gives me any confidence in like us getting Garrett Wilson that we wanted. This was like just a weird game script. Rodgers is never going to throw the ball 54 times again. But yeah, good to see, I guess. Lazard keeps scoring valuable fantasy points for you. He keeps getting into the end zone. So you have worse flex options in in these bye weeks. Mike Williams looks good too. I wish they got him more involved, but it doesn't really seem like that's happening anytime soon. On the flip side, Darnold has his worst game of the season for sure. Aaron Jones is probably the big takeaway here. He gets hurt, and they have a bye next week. But from what I've gathered, this is possibly a hip strain, possibly a hamstring strain, and he wasn't able to finish the game. He looked pretty limp on the sideline there. Now, they have a bye. It's possible that he plays after that week, but there is a decent chance that this is a multi-week injury. So maybe he misses no games. Maybe he misses one. Maybe he misses two. But Ty Chandler needs to be picked up and owned everywhere. And speaking of, obviously, I do the waiver wire show every single Tuesday. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe for that. And you can go check that out. And I'll let you know where Ty Chandler ranks and how much fab we should be dropping on that man's. Panthers-Bears. This one was obviously, not obviously, but in my eyes, a very clear fucking whooping was on the way because the Bears passed their strong point. The Panthers were without so many of their defensive players. This was my favorite spread to take on the week. It was the Bears -4. The Panthers were already down Derek Brown. They were down Shy Tuttle. They were down Jewel. They were down Shaq Thompson. They were down like everybody on their defense. There was just no chance that the Bears could fail in this game script. They had nothing going on there. The matchup was just way too easy for the Bears, like what their strengths were versus what the Panthers' strengths were. So we had a coming back down to earth game for Dalton. Chuba continues to be like a must-start player every single week until Jonathan Brooks returns. We don't really have a timeline yet, next 3 weeks hopefully, but is what it is. Nothing to really take away from the receivers. Down game for Deontay. Xavier Leggett did hurt his shoulder in this one, but it's not believed to be serious, so he could play next week. Although these types of games are going to happen when you are the Carolina Panthers. Now, they play the Falcons next week, so easier schedule. Then they get Washington, which is obviously a nice cake matchup. So I wouldn't be too scared to start the Panthers passing offense going forward, despite how they performed in this one. Now, we move over to Chicago. Caleb, 304, 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift gets home again, despite averaging 3.5 yards per carry. Roschon gets home twice, only averaging 2.5 yards per carry. Their run game is still a problem. This feels like a game where I would not get too attached to the box score results. I still think they look pretty sloppy on offense. I still think Caleb Williams is holding the ball so fucking long. And this game was a product of the Panthers defense already being one of the worst defenses in the league, but then being down like half their starters. So I will take almost nothing away from this game statistically. If you had DJ Moore, great that you had him in your lineup. Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen continue to be really low floor, like not really, confident ceiling players. Keenan Allen is like an absolute dud at this point. I don't think he has like 100 receiving yards on the season, so that's not great. Ravens-Bengals, this was fucking epic. This was an epic game, epic failure by the Bengals. We actually got this on camera. We were watching the games here, and the way that they ran out those last 3 plays where they had the field goal opportunity, you could just tell they were going to miss. Like, anytime a coach plays like a fucking coward, anytime a coach plays the way they did at the end where it was just 3 straight runs, we're like playing not to lose, we're playing for this field goal, you just knew they were going to fucking break that field goal at the end. Like, that energy becomes the fucking play. It was pathetic. But Lamar continues to be just an absolute dynamite quarterback in fantasy. The quarterback one right now. Derrick Henry, after that shaky week 1, continues to be a top 3 fantasy option right now. He looks incredible. Zay Flowers, big bounce back game. Mark Andrews, 4 for 55. He should have got in the end zone too. Lamar actually fucking hit him on a terrible ball at like the 3-yard line. If he had led him, we're looking at a 4 for 60 and a touchdown game for Mark Andrews. But regardless, like fantasy-wise, he was actually the 3rd leading tight end. Likely scores twice. Charlie Kolar scores once and has a 64-yard receiving day. You can't really trust any tight end in Baltimore right now. I can't really trust any pass catchers or any players in this lineup outside of Lamar, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers right now. Cincinnati, Joe Burrow is so good right now, and it is coming. If you own him in fantasy, it's like a perfect storm of the Bengals defense being horrific with their offense just clicking on all cylinders. So he's a high-end QB1 right now. Jamar Chase is elite in every sense of the word. Great to see T. Higgins back. I was very high on him coming into this week. 9 for 83, gets in twice, 14 targets. Love to see it. Extremely condensed target share. they're clicking now because they have, their receivers at full strength. 26 targets on 39 attempts between Chase and T. Higgins. So obviously them two are must starts every week. Now, the running back situation gets murky here because Zach Moss is weird. He got like hip drop tackled, looked like he had a high ankle sprain. He ended up coming back in the game like a play or two later, gets one carry, then comes out for the rest of the game. Feels a lot like the Joe Mixon situation where Joe Mixon had the high ankle sprain in the middle of the game, came back in, but like was super ineffective, and now he's missed like 3 weeks in a row. So unless he got really lucky, it's possible, maybe they missed it. From most things I've read, the video looks like it's a high ankle sprain. So if you're a Moss owner, I would it's kind of a big hit. He's been kind of shitty, like overall, like he's not really like doing much, but he always gets there at the end of the day. He's been like a 15, 16, 17 point PPR guy because he catches, 5 for 40 and then gets a goal line score. He's been good. So I would probably expect him to miss a couple weeks, which means Chase Brown is going to shoot up rankings. He looks so much more explosive. I don't know that he's a better back. I don't know that they're going to use him in the full capacity of like just combining these two running backs. But if these two consolidate, that leaves an RB1 in your lineup because them two together, like they don't put up like big numbers. But when you start to add them all together, 21 carries for 70 yards, and then the receiving game, they get an underrated number of targets. Where Zach Moss catches like 3 to 5 balls every week, so does Chase Brown, 2 to 3. Now you're combining these two, you're getting like 5 to 6 catches a game and possibly scoring a touchdown in one way or another. I think you're going to get a floor play of like 15 out of Chase Brown in PPR leagues just because the consolidation is so valuable in this high-scoring offense right now. Moving on to the Dolphins and the Patriots. I don't know what to take away from here. This is disgusting. Devon Achane suffered a concussion early on. They have a bye in week 6, so he'll probably be back in week 7. And then signs are pointing towards Tua coming back in week 8, which is huge for anyone that owns Miami Dolphins players. However, symptoms with concussions can come back at any time. Like if anything happens concussion-wise or symptom-wise from now through week 8, it's probably a huge pushback for another few weeks. So it's not set in stone by any means, but feels like the vibes have been positive out of Miami as it relates to Tua for the time being. Now with Devon Achane out, we can look at the snap counts between the Miami running backs. And Jalen Wright played well, looked explosive. Raheem Mostert, though, I think he was supposed to play a diminished role pretty much, but he was kind of forced into a bigger role, and he just makes this offense run a little bit smoother. Like they're able to run downhill with Raheem Mostert, and I do think he'll be the starter over Jalen Wright in week 7 if Devon Achane misses time. However, 1 week concussion, 2 weeks. Devon Achane will probably be back, but probably worth noting just to see what these splits were like. Raheem Mostert, 55%. Jalen Wright only down at 34%. I just think that speaks to the style of player that Raheem Mostert is. He's not even like a big back, but they kind of use him as like the bruiser back, and they kind of need that right now when all they did, the beginning weeks of the season was like focus on gimmicky type beats. Just kind of keep an eye on Devon Achane reports, but I'm not going crazy on the wire on any of these guys, just given that they have the bye in week 6. On the flip side, nothing brewing here. We need Drake May to come in, but I also don't think they should put Drake May in behind this offensive line. Ramondre Stevenson, turns out that benching was a lie. He did sit the first series, I think, of the game, but then came in and immediately just resumed his role. So if you were ballsy enough to start him, it paid off for you. He did tweak his knee at the end of the game, but he came out in the press conference afterward. He said it's not serious. No one from the Patriots sideline considers it serious, so I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. Cleveland Browns continue to be just the worst thing that's ever been put onto a football field. You just can't trust anyone in this offense whatsoever. I would continue rolling out Amari Cooper, as a wide receiver 3, just because the target numbers are insane. And again, there's been a few callbacks. Last week we had the 80-yard touchdown callback, and we're looking at him in a much different light if he catches that, or if the holding call doesn't happen, which was a ridiculous holding call to begin with. So again, I think Cooper kind of is what he is at this point. You have a very talented high target receiver attached to a shitty offense and shitty quarterback who got sacked another fucking 7 times in this game, took 11 quarterback hits. I don't know how he's still standing upright, to be honest with you. On the flip side, Jaden Daniels kind of balls out again, 9.5 yards per attempt, 238, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Also gets it done on the ground, 82 yards. To be honest with you, on the Washington situation, I could not have been more wrong in the preseason. I thought this offensive line was going to be abysmal. They've played really well. Their defense has played way better than anticipated. And Jaden's just making plays. Now, Jaden coming out, I had no problem with him as a prospect. Thought he was a very good prospect. Long ball was like beautiful. His touch was great. I just didn't think Cliff was really going to let him unleash it, and we didn't see it in the beginning of the year. And now we're starting to see it a little bit more. I still think there are some questions to be answered in terms of like playing against good defenses. And it's easy to say like, oh, it was the Browns defense, but the Browns defense is clearly not what we thought it was going to be coming into the year. The Browns' entire team is just decimated right now. The defense can't be good when the offense is playing this poorly and giving them the field position and no time to rest and all that kind of shit. But yeah, Jaden Daniels has been fucking incredible. Terry McLaurin has really like come on in the last like few weeks, so you obviously start him every single week. In the backfield, Eckler looks good, man. He hasn't really been getting into the end zone, but I think there are like really, really big blow-up games on the horizon for him, especially in games when they are trailing, man. He's been really efficient. He obviously like clearly has lost a step. He can't break away long runs anymore, or like finish those long runs, I should say. He keeps getting tackled from behind, but like in terms of his vision and contact balance, he's looked as good as he's ever looked. He just doesn't have that long speed anymore. So Eckler's a dude that I'd be comfortable trotting out pretty much every single week in my flex, especially during these bye weeks. Brian Robinson was like kind of supposed to miss this game, ends up getting 2 goal line scores. Not like a great game. He obviously has as many carries as Jeremy McNichols. They didn't really need him though because they fucking absolutely beat the shit out of the Browns, but still good to see him out there and get another 2 touchdowns. He's got to be leading the league in goal line scores, I think, right? Or just running back carries or running back touchdowns. Let's see. Nope, we got Derrick Henry at 6, Kyron at 6, Kamara at 5, and Brian Robinson at 5. Okay. I was wrong. Jags, Colts. This one makes me sick because I didn't start Joe Flacco when I should have. I like literally tried to put him in my lineup before the London game, and it was 9:32, and I checked my fucking app, and the games had locked, and I wanted to but Flacco gets it there statistically. I don't think he looked fantastic, to be honest with you, until kind of like the last quarter. As you could see, there was fucking 41 points put up in the final quarter of this game. Jags take it down 37-34 to get their first win. Flacco 359 and 3 touchdowns through the air. Now, one of the questions coming in was like, what happens with the backfield split with Jonathan Taylor out? I was kind of hesitant to suggest Trey Sermon. I didn't think he would catch this many passes. He catches 6 balls for 25 yards. I guess with Joe Flacco in, we have to remember just the sheer number of checkdowns that this man throws when he is at quarterback. Like, if you remember in the Jets days, like Breece Hall and Michael Carter were catching like 7 passes each per game. When you look at the splits between the actual backfield itself, we had 58% in favor of Trey Sermon, 42% for Tyler Goodson. Obviously, the rush attempts went in favor of Trey Sermon. When we talk about the routes, though, they did go in favor of Tyler Goodson, who ran 44%, as opposed to Trey Sermon's 34%. Trey Sermon was the goal line back. He was a short down and distance back, and they split long down and distance snaps. So it was a little bit close to 50-50. Obviously, the role favored Trey Sermon getting the goal line stuff. So he did end up getting, if you started him in a PPR league, you're obviously happy because he caught 6 balls, got the goal line score. Didn't look great, but it is what it is at that point. We'll see if Anthony Richardson returns next week. I would assume that he does, but as it relates to the receivers, man, Josh Downs is like a must start when Joe Flacco was under center. Michael Pittman does get home because he scores a touchdown, 5 for 37 and a touchdown. Alec Pierce, 3 for 134 and a touchdown, does his best week 1 impression. I mean, you could do worse than Pierce, I guess, in like a flex on these bye weeks. If you think about it, he's like, there's only one difference between Pierce and Tank Dell right now. It's that Pierce is actually fucking producing. Flip side, go to Jacksonville. T. Law, 371, 2 touchdowns. Receivers, Christian Kirk, 4 for 88. Didn't start well, but finished well. Ended up kind of getting home for you. Gabe Davis left with a shoulder injury, I believe, so we'll have to kind of monitor if that's serious. Not that he's making an impact, but it would open up more targets probably for Brian Thomas, who's been an absolute fucking stud this year. Another 5 for 122 and a touchdown game. Had an 85-yard touchdown. Brian Thomas now leads all rookie wide receivers. Obviously, Malik missed this week's game with a concussion, but still impressive. Brian Thomas leads all rookie wide receivers in receiving yards right now. okay? So he has been just a godsend, even though Jacksonville is 1-4. What might be more interesting is obviously the Tank Bigsby breakout. 13 for 101 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Dude busts out for a 65-yard touchdown run. ETN is the pass-catching back here for the most part. Catches 6 balls, I should say, on 7 targets for 43 yards. But ETN can't get a fucking thing going on the ground. It literally looks like Tank Bigsby like space jammed Travis Etienne's powers. Now, if we look at the snap counts, this was the week in which we finally had a little flippening here where the Tank Bigsby snaps actually topped Travis Etienne's 40% to 39%, 57% of the rushes compared to 26%. Did run fewer routes because that's just the style of player they are. But he got the goal line carries. He got the short down and distance carries. Like Tank was that dude yesterday. And I saw a thread on Twitter that I think I bookmarked. Yeah, from John Shipley, who is a beat reporter for the Jacksonville Jaguars team. Let me see where it was. Did a breakdown. He said, Tank Bigsby ranks number 1 in the NFL in rushing yards over expectation per attempt at plus 4.2. Number 2 is Derrick Henry. Bigsby also leads the NFL in yards after contact per attempt at 7.1. Obviously, that's going to be a little bit inflated by some like big breakaway runs, but he's doing it damn near weekly now. Only 2 players in the NFL have hit 20 miles per hour on 3 different runs. Tank Bigsby and Jaden Daniels. Bigsby is also tied with Jahmyr Gibbs for leading the NFL in EPA per attempt. He's become a star. So this was the Tank that they thought they drafted last year. Still tough to like really get a read on when you could start him and when you can't start him. He is in the discussion with Travis Etienne as like RB3 flex players week in and week out. I think both of them are probably going to get 10 to 12 touches per week. Who gets the touchdown? Who knows? Etienne probably has the pass catching work, for the remainder of the season. So Tank looks better. Is there a world where he completely takes the backfield? I don't know, man. I don't feel like they're going to completely go away from Etienne ever. I think this might be a little bit of a messy situation, but Jacksonville's defense is so bad that they're forced to like move the ball at a high tempo, run a lot of plays, and just get a lot of guys involved to the point where like maybe both of them are usable. Let's keep going. We got Texans and the Bills. Josh Allen played his worst game of the season by far, and we're seeing the effects of not having real receivers out here in Buffalo. They had no Khalil Shakir in this game. Keon Coleman ended up scoring on a 49-yard catch and run, but that was his only catch, and it wasn't a good game outside of that. So there was nothing going on in the Bills receiver room. I really wonder if they trade for a veteran. This feels like a team that needs a veteran in this receiving group that can actually make some fucking plays. Whether it's, I don't know, D-Hop or they need some sort of juice out here in Buffalo when things are not going well for them. They don't really have a receiver they could turn to and like feel good about. James Cook is continuing to be great, but you need to be able to play from behind and not just have Josh Allen run the ball and like literally get concussed and come back into the game. Houston, C.J. Stroud, 331 and a touchdown. The running back room, God damn it, Joe Mixon, just come back, please. Because like we can't keep watching Cam Akers roll out here, even though Darian Gumbawale played a lot more than he did and was probably the better option overall. Caught 6 passes, 57 yards. But the receivers, we had Nico Collins caught a bomb, like a 70-yard touchdown pretty much, and then pulled up with a little hamstring injury on the sideline. Ended up leaving the game for the remainder. Now, he was dealing with a minor hamstring tweak in practice, which is what makes this a little bit concerning. From what I've heard, though, hamstrings, anything can really happen. You could be a fucking cone like A.J. Brown and miss a month of the season, or you can play 2 days later like Chris Olave did last weekend. So from what I've heard, it's not a major concern. If I had to bet 50-50, I kind of think he probably plays next week. But just keep an eye on practice reports because Nico obviously missed the remainder of the game. Tank Dell continues to be just such a disappointment. I hold on to him, dude, just because, like, one, if Nico misses time, he'll play more, and he'll probably get more targets. 2, Tank is, like, one of those dudes, especially if you're struggling with depth right now. He's one of those dudes where you put him into your flex during these bye weeks. Like, you don't want to start him, but if you have to, you might catch him on that big game. Like, you know that a big game or two they're coming somewhere at some point. You don't want to start him because it's so hard to predict it, and his floor has not been great. But, like, Tank Dell's the type of dude I kind of want to flex during bye weeks, because if he pops off, you have such an advantage during those bye weeks when everybody else is down their starters as well. The Raiders-Broncos, the Raiders benched Minshew in favor of Aiden O'Connell. I can guarantee you Aiden O'Connell is not the answer there. Like, Minshew's been terrible, but, like, Aiden O'Connell is far inferior to pretty much anybody that any team is rolling out. Like, I'd literally rather have Deshaun Watson playing than Aiden O'Connell right now, but we'll see if they make a quarterback change. In the backfield, kind of a disappointing day for Alexander Mattison, considering Zamir White did not play. Amir Abdullah ended up breaking off a 40-yard run, had a touchdown. But, yeah, there's no one to start here in this game outside of Brock Bowers, who looks incredible still. Jacoby Myers, 6 for 72, so he gets home. Disappointing day for Trey Tucker after he was a pretty popular pickup. The Raiders play the Steelers next week, so not a great matchup. I don't know that I have confidence in playing really anyone outside of Brock Bowers. On the flip side, we've got Bo Nix playing a pretty good game, 2 touchdowns through the air, another touchdown. He's on pace, I heard somewhere this morning. He's on pace to have 10 rushing touchdowns this year. It's fucking crazy. Javonte, 13 for 61. Also catches 5 passes for 50 yards, so he gets home, relatively speaking, via PPR, but there's really no one else to trust in this offense as it's been for the entirety of the year. Cardinals, San Fran. Cardinals somehow win this game. No idea how they pulled it off, but probably because their playmakers made plays. You have Kyler, 195 and a touchdown through the air, 7 for 83 and a touchdown on the ground, including that Babe Ruth type beat. So he broke through the line immediately, 50-yard run. James Conner, 19 for 86, 2 for 14 through the air. So 100 yards from scrimmage, but touchdownless, so doesn't feel that great. Marvin Harrison held in check, 2 for 36. Got the targets, but didn't produce necessarily. There's still something a little bit off about this passing game, as you could tell. On the flip side, Ayuk had his breakout game. 8 for 147 on 12 targets. Good to see. Kittle had a monster game. 12 targets, 8 for 64 and a touchdown. This is just the San Fran offense. You just don't really know who's going to get what. Jordan Mason, 14 for 89. Relatively disappointing considering what C-Mac did last year to this fucking team. C-Mac had 2 games of over 40 PPR fantasy points against the Cardinals last year. So while Mason ran the ball well, like obviously 6.4 yards per carry, and started to just like rip off chunk plays, him not getting in the end zone, him not really catching many balls, like obviously a disappointing performance. You could see how much, you're seeing all the Twitter threads now about how much the San Fran team is missing C-Mac in the backfield, in the red zone. And it's obviously true. He's so versatile and you could use him in so many different ways that I don't know that you could use with Jordan Mason. So from what I've heard, like, what are we doing with C-Mac? I can't really tell you anything different than the reports that we're all hearing, right? Like, he went to Germany, everyone freaked out, but then you learn that the procedure that he got wasn't legal here. So it was actually probably a good thing he went to Germany because that will help speed up the process. And then we heard he's dealing with Achilles tendonitis in both Achilles. And we're like, fuck, now we put him, it's bad again. It's all good, then it's bad again. It's like just fucking back and forth. This is the type of game that they can't lose, though. Like now, when they're starting to lose these games and the offense looks a little bit broken like this, and you could tell that C-Mac's being missed, you have to win these games to give an extra week of like a week or two, another week and another week and another week of padding for C-Mac to get healthy. I do wonder if games like this start to make their decision-making process a little bit different for C-Mac. Do they rush him back a little bit quicker than they normally would have? So Debo, really bad game, but honestly, I'm not concerned. His better days are ahead. Packers-Rams. Jordan Love still feels less than 100%. 224, 2 touchdowns through the air. This should have been an absolute blow-up spot against the Rams defense. But, yeah, I still think he's hampered a little bit by the knee. He's probably like 80, 85%. I still think we need to get him to 100%, but they have another cupcake matchup against the Cardinals next week. Jacobs gets home 19 for 73 and a touchdown. Not really efficient, but it is what it is. Now, the receivers. We were very high on Dontavian Wicks. Dontavian Wicks shit the bed, obviously. 2 for 20. That man needs to get some hands surgically attached to his fucking wrists because he cannot catch passes. That being said, like, I am confidently rolling out Dontavian Wicks again next week. you can't sit him after the bad game because then that's where the blow-up games happen. If you look at just the usage, there is no difference between last week's performance and this week's performance in terms of just overall volume and participation. So just as easily as he went 5 for 80 and 2 touchdowns last week, he ran more routes. He had just as much of a target percentage in the offense as he did last week. His catchable targets actually went down a little bit. He obviously, he drops balls. That's part of the experience, but he is such a good separator that he's going to make big plays when he does catch passes. So you can be mad about starting Wicks this week. I would be too, but I would put him right back into my lineup next week. One thing we did get right, actually 2 things we did get right, were both the leading receivers for these teams. Tucker Kraft, 4 for 88, 2 touchdowns. He was like such a priority ad for us on the waiver wire show last week that if you've been hurting at tight end at all and you ended up getting Kraft, not only did he probably win you this week, but I think you legitimately have a top 5 tight end going forward for the rest of the season. Getting a pass catcher attached to this offense right now, running the number of routes that he is, Luke Musgrave didn't play in this one, so he's banged up, able to make plays like he did after the catch. Like, he is such a good pickup and such a plug-and-play starter right now for your fantasy team. So shout out to Tucker Kraft, the GOAT. On the flip side, Kyron gets home 22 for 102 and a touchdown. Now, Blake Corum finally jumped Ronnie Rivers. And I think it's kind of important because Blake Corum was probably dropped in most leagues. I would pick up and stash Blake Corum. One of the reasons that I think he was okay to drop was because it was like, damn, Ronnie Rivers is playing over him. If Blake Corum is back here as the RB2 again, this line has been banged up for the first month of the season. They will eventually start getting their pieces back, be at full strength, get cut back. Like, this offense will start rolling again. And Kyron has always dealt with like ankle and lower body injuries. If he ends up, tweaking an ankle, a high ankle sprain in like week 8 or 9, Blake Corum becomes such a valuable waiver wire ad while this team is back to hopefully full strength. Now, the more they lose, the more concerned I get about like how much effort they put in the second half of the season. They keep losing these games, but they're fighting hard, man. I think a lot of these games could have broken in ways where they end up winning. So I don't think Sean McVay's in the world of giving up yet, but I think Blake Corum needs to be owned. Jordan Whittington, 10 targets. Tutu Atwell, 10 targets. 7 for 89 for Jordan Whittington. He was a guy that I was pretty high on for PPR leagues this week. I thought he was a really, really solid flex fill-in, and he kind of comes through in this one for you. They do have their week 6 bye, and then apparently Cooper Kupp is eyeing a return in week 7. I will believe that when I see it. They ruled him out of this game like Monday morning, like midnight, 12:01 a.m. Monday morning. I don't. Do they give practice reports during bye weeks? I don't remember if they do, to be honest with you. This is something I probably should know. We're going to need to obviously start to see Cooper Kupp back at practice. Like, he has not stepped foot on a practice field. If we got like one limited practice last week, I would be like, okay, maybe I believe he'll be back week 7. I don't know. So as a Cooper Kupp owner, I am very pessimistic, but could be wrong. Giants Seahawks. This was a shocker of the week. Daniel Jones played great, 257, 2 touchdowns. They win the game 29-20. I think the story of the game here, as Malik Neighbors is out, Wan'Dale Robinson does kind of get home, 6 for 36 and a touchdown. But Darius Slayton, he was a really good pickup and fill-in if you had Malik Neighbors or needed wide receiver help. 8 for 122 and a touchdown. He's been great every time they ask him to be like the guy in that offense, and then they just like never use him otherwise. So it's kind of like a handcuff running back. It's kind of weird, but it is what it is. I want to talk about a real handcuff fucking running back, though. It's Tyrone Tracy Jr., 18 for 129 on the ground, 7.2 yards per carry, only catches 1 pass, which is kind of disappointing considering he was a wide receiver in college, turned running back. This was a dude that if you followed our Dynasty channel at all during the offseason, you probably own a lot of Tyrone Tracy on your Dynasty teams, and you should be fucking ecstatic about that. What's his role when Devin Singletary comes back? He's probably relegated back to the backup role. I think, and this was always my sentiment throughout the entire summer with Devin Singletary. So one of the reasons I faded him. Looked terrible the first couple weeks of the season, but that's what happens with veteran running backs. They get all that run in the beginning of the season, and a lot of them get hurt over the course of the end of the season. And I think Tyrone Tracy was talented enough to force a committee here, and this is kind of how it's played out. Tracy should absolutely be splitting work on the ground with Devin Singletary. Now, take nothing away from D. Sing. He's looked great this year as well. But I think if you have two guys that can both be versatile, both catch passes, both rip off big plays, like you should be utilizing both of them. So Tracy, he'll be a priority add. I just don't know if I'm going to overspend given the lack of confidence I have in what his role is going to be when Singletary's back. Now, they have a great fucking matchup against Cincinnati next week. An underrated matchup against Philly. Steelers are tough, but like Commanders, Panthers, the Cowboys, the Colts in the playoff game, in the fantasy championship, like great schedule. So if Singletary misses more time or like Tracy just emerges, like Tracy could be a huge player down the stretch for fantasy teams. On the flip side, I mean, they got down and they just chose to throw the ball every 5 seconds. So just a bad day all around from Seattle. Kenneth Walker, 5 for 19. 757 through the air, though. He is, what I will say is since coming back, he has seen a shitload of targets. So that's great. In games where he's also going to get, 15, 18 carries in a normal game script game for Seattle. But you could see that the offensive line for Seattle became a massive problem in this one. Geno got sacked 7 times. The front seven for New York is, very good, filled with a lot of talented players. But it was just such a mismatch in this one that it became too overwhelming for Seattle to overcome here, and it became a problem for the running backs, became a problem for Geno, obviously. So much better days ahead for Kenneth, obviously, and just his involvement in the passing game is something that you should be pretty fucking hyped about. And the Sunday Night Football game, which didn't start till like fucking 10 p.m. Eastern time. Fuck you, West Coast motherfuckers. I feel like Biggie, the opposite of Tupac right now. Fuck you, you fat motherfuckers out there on the West Coast getting to watch this game at 6 p.m. even after a time delay. Nonsense. Absolute and fucking nonsense. The only real takeaways here from the Dallas side, Rico Dowdle has clearly stepped in as the running back one here. 20 for 87 on the ground. Also scored a touchdown through the air for the second consecutive week, 2 for 27. So he goes over a $115 total and a touchdown. So he is starting to become an every week flex / low end RB2 right now as the clear workhorse here. And then Jalen Tolbert, man, with Brandon Cooks sidelined for probably multiple weeks, Tolbert stepped up and continued his like pretty good underrated season right now. He looks like a legit, wide receiver 2 in this offense. I don't mean fantasy. He's probably more of like still a bye week fill-in, but 7 for 87, touchdown, led the team with 10 targets. Clear that him and Prescott are developing real chemistry after all the positive reports that we heard about that chemistry during the summer. And Tolbert is definitely a pickup and stash for the time being, and I think you could probably play him if you need to play someone during bye weeks. Now, the Steelers. Fields had a comeback down to earth game, which I felt like was like the hype on Fields felt like it got way too high. Like he had 3 average games, then had 1 big game, and then everyone's like, yep, this is what he is now for sure, no doubt about it. And then, he scores 2 touchdowns through the air, but 4.9 yards per attempt, only runs for 27 yards, whatever fantasy day. Najee Harris had all the work in the backfield and, of course, disappoints once again, 14 for 42, 2 for 35 through the air. Nothing really to take away from anything here, just a disappointing day for George Pickens. Thought he was really going to kind of get home against this Dallas defense. Unfortunately, did not. 3 for 26. Now, in terms of the bye weeks for the upcoming week, we have, I want to say 4 teams. Yep. We got the Chiefs, the Rams, the Dolphins, and the Vikings. So, in terms of injured players, we have a hopeful return from Cooper Kupp after their bye. Don't know if I believe it. We have a hopeful return for Devon Achane from the concussion after their bye. We have a hopeful but possibly unlikely return from Aaron Jones after the bye. So you got some lucky breaks if you have, Aaron Jones, Devon Achane in terms of the timing of their injuries, but we'll have to see. But those are the teams on the bye next week. Obviously, a lot of firepower through the offensive output there. And I think that is all the games for this week. So I will leave you again with, if you want these numbers, this data at your fingertips, fantasylife.com. You can use code BDGE when you check out. That's going to be a 20% discount. It's only $100 for the entire year. You'll have it through week 5 of next year for $80. Like literally the best investment you can pretty much make in terms of a product. And if you want to talk about investments, this right here, no fucking brainer. Mahomes, half a passing yard for tonight. Okay? He's literally got to complete one pass past the line of scrimmage. I think he can do it. He's pretty good. He's been pretty bad for fantasy, but I think he can get past the line of scrimmage for y'all this week, all right? So if you download the Underdog Fantasy app, also linked very high up in the description down there, use code BDGE when you deposit $10 or more. You're going to get a deposit bonus. You're going to get this free square on the app for you, and they're going to continue hitting you and peppering you with free squares throughout like normal games anyways. So shout out to Underdog. Shout out to this free square. Shout out to Fantasy Life. Shout out to you. Smoochies. We out here.